trade deadline is officially over, and I have 3 big winners and 3 big losers. So let's go ahead and talk about that. We're going to start with the losers first, because let's get the negatives out of the way. We're going to start with the Philadelphia 76ers. I think they're losers just in a general sense of you gave up Jarrett McCain for very little, and in my opinion is Jarrett McCain could have been a trade piece to get maybe a decent role player. I do know they were trying to get rid of some money to try to get under that second apron, especially with Paul George's suspension. But my opinion, this guy was going to be Rookie of the Year last year. He hasn't been very great this year because his role is kind of weird with Maxey and VJ. So I understand moving him. I thought they were going to bring in somebody half decent with him, or the picks that they acquired for trading McCain would have been better player, or would have been put into a different offer to bring in somebody else as well, which was obviously didn't happen. They didn't make those trades. They ended up also just trading away Eric Gordon, which doesn't matter. The guy doesn't play. So in my opinion, the picks they got too aren't very good. They got the Rockets first round pick for next year. The Rockets are obviously a good team. They got KD and a bunch of other dudes. They will be in the playoffs. So that'll be a pick somewhere in the 20s. I just don't understand exactly where they were coming at from there. I don't think it was like this god awful thing, but I think moving a guy who was potentially Rookie of the Year last year for a top, or like a 20th something pick in the 2 second rounders, it just doesn't make a ton of sense. Also, OKC now gets better, which hurts everybody in the league. I don't know what role McCain will play on OKC because they are so stacked anyway, but he's still more talent being added, and they were already very talented, and he was almost Rookie of the Year last year, so it's a crazy amount of talent. The second biggest loser I have is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and here's why I have Cleveland as the biggest loser. So basically, all they did was money dump in a lot of cases. They moved Lonzo Ball and didn't get anything back for him. And they realistically just kind of made a dumb trade, in my opinion. James Harden for Darius Garland is a terrible trade. Let's be completely honest. James Harden's a great player. Don't get me wrong. He will be very good for them in this year, but then he'll get pissed off and want out just like every other time this has happened. But yeah, I mean, in my opinion, this is just a bad trade. You traded a young guy for an old guy who do the same thing, except for one of them might be a little bit cheaper, but you're going to have to pay him an extension, so he won't be cheaper. It just makes no sense to me. I think, honestly, it helps the Clippers out a lot. We'll get into them in the winners because they're one of my winners. But I think Cleveland just, it's a bad Hail Mary. I think it's a shot that they're hoping that James Harden brings a different type of gameplay that Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell didn't do very well together, and they're going to move off of that and try to just make it work with Harden. And I don't think that's going to work. Harden is not a guy who wants to play second, third fiddle on a team, and Darius Garland probably would have, which is why I just don't get it. I mean, I get it for some money reasons, but you traded a 20-something-year-old for a 36-year-old. I mean, it just makes no sense. You gave up a second-round pick, too, to get Harden. So you gave up a pick and the younger player, not the better player. Harden's still obviously better, averaging 25 points, but I don't love that trade. And then, obviously, Lonzo Ball didn't really matter too much, but you kind of dump him off and you don't even get a second for him is kind of... It is whatever. But the last loser, honestly, I have Utah. I mean, I get Utah added a ton of talent, and I understand that. But in my opinion, these trades don't make a ton of sense. Utah was building for the future. They're putting together a very good team for the future. And what they evidently did here by kind of just trading a bunch of picks. Now, granted, they are not that important of picks. They kept their pick for next year, so they'll have another top 5 pick, but they bring in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lonzo Ball, who is something they usually do, so that one is not that big of a deal. But bringing in Jaren Jackson Jr. tells me that you're going to make a little bit of a commit to start, and I just don't see it. I don't think they are the biggest losers. In my opinion, it's probably Cleveland. But I do think that they are a loser in this situation because they got the best player. It's not the worst trade ever. It just doesn't make sense. If they were in the East, it would make sense. But they're in the West. Do you think Jaren Jackson Jr. or Lauri Markkanen and maybe Ace Bailey gets to that level is going to take you to that next level? In the West, I just don't see it. None of them are superstars. You don't have a clear number one. You're not beating Wemby. You're not beating Shea. It just isn't happening. You're not going to beat Jokic. I don't know. Like, there's another team we'll talk about in the winners bracket that I feel like elevated their way up, and they're on the side that it works. This does not work. But let's get out of the negatives and let's talk about some of the winners. Let's start with the least winner of the winners, in my opinion, and that is the Clippers. Honestly, Darius Garland's injury might keep him out for too long. They might fall out, and they don't have their own pick, which goes to OKC, which freaking sucks. But I think getting Darius Garland is huge because you go in the next year and you replace a guy who didn't want to play for you anymore with a young, good talent. If he can stay healthy, if Darius Garland can stay healthy, he would be a very good number two option to Kawhi Leonard. Health is obviously the issue with Darius Garland, but they definitely, in my opinion, got the better overall player because Harden will be retired in a couple years at most, or not even in Cleveland in a year or two, because you know how Harden is. He demands off of every team he gets onto at this point. And I think this is a very good trade for the Clippers. I think they got the better overall player, and they get a second round pick, which doesn't really matter. But I think the only issue is the Clippers would have been a huge winners by getting Darius Garland here in moving off of James Harden is if they had their own pick. They don't, which is why it kind of hurts because depending on how long Darius Garland is out with that toe, if he can play again this season, is going to affect this team because they were going to be probably at least a playing team with Harden. Harden is obviously going to make the playoffs every year of his career. As he goes to Cleveland, they're going to make it pretty easily. The second biggest winner, and honestly, you can argue this is the biggest winner. It is Chicago Bulls fans. Ah, man, I am a huge fan of Kenny Beecham, and I bet you this guy is ecstatic because they have finally blown it up. They have started the rebuild. They got Mooch out of there. They got Kobe White or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, and they brought in some young talent. They got Jaden Ivey. That is a very solid pickup. I do like getting Jaden Ivey because it's starting a rebuild without a complete reset. You still have Josh Giddey. We'll see how that kind of plays out. They might not pay him in the offseason, or they might try to build around Jaden Ivey and yeah. Anyway, holy crap, I cannot speak. But I do like this for the Bulls. They got a little bit younger. They moved off of some of that old talent, and now they can finally start sliding down to rock bottom in the Eastern Conference so that they will acquire better draft picks and actually finally rebuild instead of sitting in the play-in, being the 7th, 8th seed every year at best. They finally actually accepted that the rebuild has to happen, and I think that is a huge win for Bulls fans because I don't know, sitting in that mediocrity that they have been in for what the last like 5, 6, 7 years, like it is crazy. But I do like that for the Bulls fans, and I think honestly it works well for the Bulls. I think the Bulls are also winners, but they're not my number one winners. My number one winners is the Washington Wizards. Yes, I'm racking their hat on today. Reason why I have Washington as the biggest winners is because they went out and got Trae Young and Anthony Davis. Now, two guys who are probably not going to play for him this year, and they will have to try to re-sign Trae Young in the offseason, but he did kind of want to go to Washington, and they didn't give up a single one of their young studs. They still have a very young team. They're going to let guys like Sarr and Bolakari, I butchered the crap out of that, anyway, play and develop a little bit this year, and then next year they could be a threat. You know, obviously it's keeping those guys healthy, but if they re-sign Young and Anthony Davis comes back and plays healthy, the Wizards will actually be competitive next year, and I think that is a difference maker. And they didn't give up much. They gave up a couple bad picks for I think I forget exactly where it was, but they're gonna be like pick 20 to 30. It was like an OKC pick, and it was I think it was a who else? It was somebody else's who's actually a pretty good pick. Oh, it was the Suns pick. So that one could be good, but it's a 2031. They gave up, I think, a couple second round picks and a bunch of no name players, pretty much. I mean, they also got off of some of their old guys who weren't very good, and Chris Middleton and CJ McCollum, who they honestly kind of just needed to get out of there. Also, Corey Kispert, who his role in Washington was at best a 3-point shooter. That's about exactly what he did. So moving off of all those guys and bringing in two studs to build around the youth is very good. And I think Washington actually made moves this season that puts them in a chance to be a real threat. And they kept their first round pick, which means they got Anthony Davis and Trae Young without moving their own first round pick, which means there's a very good chance they're drafting in the top 5 again. And this is a loaded draft class. They could bring in another talent. I love what Washington's done, but let me know down in the comment section below, who do you think is the biggest winners and the biggest losers? I'll see you guys in the next video.